Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're getting into a really intriguing paradox, one that kind of sits right at the heart of celebrity, business, and, well, how we see public figures. How did this, multi-million-dollar empire built very carefully on the idea of kindness end up facing this huge global backlash for not being kind enough? We're going to unpack the whole journey of Ellen DeGeneres, from being America's sweetheart, dancing on our screens, ending every show with "Be kind," to suddenly being right in the middle of this massive public firestorm. So the big question for us today is, how did she fall from that peak at incredible success into such a major scandal? And maybe even more interesting, why didn't she just disappear? Which, let's be honest, a lot of people might have done.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Ellen's story is such a unique case study, not just about being famous, but really about the power of her brand, about finance, and honestly, about resilience. We've gathered a whole stack of sources for this deep dive, including this really comprehensive video analysis called Ellen DeGeneres, from $500 Stardom to Scandal, her redemption story. And our mission today, it isn't just to retell her story. It's to pull out the key insights, the nuggets of knowledge that go beyond just her. Things about strategy, navigating crises, and the real cost sometimes of building your entire brand around one idea. So by the end of this, you're hopefully going to have a fresh perspective on fame, sure, but also on finance and what it really takes to build something that actually lasts, something that can weather these storms.
Absolutely. I mean, for almost 20 years, Ellen was basically the queen of daytime TV, no question. A cultural icon, totally synonymous with, goodwill, laughs, and that constant message. Kindness. She built up this huge net worth, estimated around $500 million, carefully turning her personal brand into a whole media empire. But then, summer 2020, boom, that image, so carefully built, it just shattered. Allegations came out about a toxic work environment on her show, and it sparked this huge public firestorm that really shook her whole legacy. We really want to dig into why the woman who told millions, day after day, be kind to one another, became the target of so much criticism. And maybe just as importantly, how she chose to respond, what she did next.
And it's not just about a celebrity's personal ups and downs, though that part's compelling, obviously. What's really useful here, I think, is how her journey gives us this unique lens to look at bigger themes. We're talking personal branding on a massive scale, the strategic use of financial leverage, something often hidden, and crisis management in today's really fast-paced digital world. Her story goes way beyond just entertainment news. It speaks to the fundamentals of building influence, keeping it in a public landscape that shifts so quickly. There are lessons here for almost anyone, really.
Okay, so let's really unpack this financial mindset she had, because our sources really emphasize this as being fundamental, like the bedrock of her huge success. When you hear $500 million empire, you probably think like standard celebrity stuff, right? Endorsements, commercials, putting their name on a product for a fee. But the sources suggest Ellen's way was really different. Fundamentally different. She wasn't chasing the money directly, not as the main goal anyway. She used her fame more like a seed.
Yeah.
Not just the fruit you pick right away.
Right. And to put that in context, think about how many public figures get caught in that fame trap. It's volatile. Their income stream might depend on one big contract or a few endorsement deals here and there, which means, one bad headline, one show cancellation, and suddenly they're in real financial trouble. What Ellen seemed to understand, and what our sources really dig into, is that the real compounding value comes when you actually own the narrative, when you control the production, the distribution. She wasn't just a guest star on someone else's platform. She was the platform, not just hosting, but owning it. And this brings up a really important question for anyone trying to build something sustainable, a brand, a business, whatever. Are you just trying to cash in on attention right now? Or are you building a system around that attention, something robust with its own legs?
That difference, monetizing attention versus systematizing it, yeah, that feels absolutely key. And it applies way beyond Hollywood, for sure. Our sources point out that at the height of the Ellen DeGeneres show, she was way more than just a host dancing around. She was the executive producer. She was the brand. And crucially, she was the main strategist through her own company of very good production. This gave her incredible control, not just over the show's vibe and content day to day, but also things like distribution rights. And maybe the biggest piece, those back-end revenue streams, the stuff most celebrities don't get a big slice of.
Exactly. It wasn't passive fame at all. It was very calculated. Her show became the launchpad, the hub for a whole suite of other businesses, an ecosystem, really. We're talking fashion lines, home goods collections that did really well, pet products, even, surprisingly to some, very profitable real estate flipping. Forbes reported her earning, at one point, upwards of $50 million a year. And that wasn't just a host salary, not even close. It came because she controlled multiple money streams, those lucrative syndication deals, reruns making money years later, huge YouTube revenue from viral clips she owned, merchandise deals, partnerships with big retailers like Walmart, Bed Bath & Beyond. She leveraged her massive appeal for those deals. It shows a very deliberate shift, moving from just earning based on her talent, her performance, to earning based on ownership, owning the assets, the IP, the system she built.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit counterintuitive. Our sources really stress that Ellen rarely, if ever, led with the money talk, or even mentioned her wealth much. Her public identity, the whole brand, was built on kindness, humor, upliftment. That was the core.
So how did that persona, focusing so much on values, translate into such massive financial success? It almost seems like it shouldn't work in a purely profit-driven way.
It's actually brilliant. A strategic inversion, you could call it. By consistently focusing on those core values, kindness, humor, she built this incredibly deep well of emotional trust with her audience. They felt connected, loyal. And once that trust was solid, really solid, the money just followed. Almost naturally. It wasn't about hard-selling products. It was about serving the audience with content and values that connected with, creating this positive community vibe. Instead of demanding attention, like through controversy, she invited it. She created this space that felt safe, positive, uplifting. And this shows a powerful thing. Being liked. That can be temporary. Public opinion shifts. But being trusted, that's what scales. That allows for long-term growth, building a real empire that can actually handle ups and downs. Advertisers paid top dollar because her kindness brand felt safe, positive for their own messages. That directly boosted ad revenue and made partnerships more valuable.
Right. So what's the takeaway here for you listening? As you think about your own path, business, career, maybe just building influence online, the core lesson seems critical. Are you just chasing the spotlight, the quick hit, the momentary applause? Or are you doing what Ellen did? Building actual leverage, creating a robust, diverse system that can keep going even when the spotlight moves, a system that lasts. Yeah, our sources really trace Ellen's path to wealth as this carefully managed pivot, moving from crisis, actually, to control. It shows incredible adaptability. Before she was the daytime host everyone knew, she was a stand-up comic. Working the clubs, grinding it out, honing that wit. She got those coveted spots on Johnny Carson in the late 80s, which was huge for any comic back then, especially a woman. But she wanted more than just laughs in a club. She wanted broader reach. And that vision really came to a head in 1997.
And it's fascinating how that vision led to a moment that was, yes, revolutionary and award-winning, but also triggered this massive career disruption. We're talking about the puppy episode of her sitcom, Ellen, where she made history. Came out as gay, both her character on the show and Ellen herself in real life. Simultaneously, she's on the cover of Time magazine. The episode got, 42 million viewers. Huge numbers. Won an Emmy for writing.
Yeah.
Gave a massive moment for LGBTQ plus visibility in mainstream media. Unprecedented, really. But the backlash was immediate and fierce. Advertisers just pulled out, scared of controversy. Religious groups protested. Ratings tanked. And the network canceled the show the next year. For most people, that kind of public backlash, that cancellation, that would have been it. Career over. But Ellen's didn't end. It's sort of incubated. She stepped back from Hollywood for a few years, consciously, not retreating, but rethinking her whole approach, realizing the old way wouldn't work for her anymore.
Right. So when she came back in 2003 with the Ellen DeGeneres show, it wasn't just, hey, I'm back. Our sources really emphasized it was a strategic relaunch.
Yeah.
Calculated. This time, she wasn't just a performer. She was the executive producer. She was the brand. She held the power, the decision-making power, significant ownership. So how did that new role, that total control, change her approach? How did it make this venture more resilient than her sitcom had been?
Well, it raises that question, doesn't it? How do you build long-term success, especially after a huge setback? The show itself, The Ellen DeGeneres Show, it intentionally broke the daytime mold. She created this hybrid format. You had the talk segments, the comedy bits, but also that game show energy, and of course the surprise giveaways that became her trademark. So much heart in those. She deliberately built a platform that felt emotionally safe. She focused on uplifting everyday people, celebrating kindness in a media world often focused on conflict, and man, did it work. 19 seasons, 63 daytime Emmys, averaging 4 million viewers a day. Incredible run.
But
the strategy was even smarter than just the show's content. She built this powerful content ecosystem around it. Her YouTube channel became one of the biggest in the world, slicing up show segments into viral clips. She turned guests and moments into brand stories that lived everywhere online. And crucially, all that traffic fed back into her other businesses' merch, her production company producing other shows like Little Big Shots, Ellen's Game of Games, philanthropic work. It was layered.
It shows she understood media success wasn't about one hit show, but creating a whole system. Replicable, adaptable, self-sustaining.
Okay, so she builds this incredible, seemingly bulletproof system over years and years. Then 2020 hits, the toxic workplace scandal blows up, rocks her image completely. What was the real impact on her empire given this system she'd built? How did it hold up under that kind of intense pressure?
Yeah, and connecting this to the bigger picture, this is exactly where that long-term strategy really showed its strength. Our sources make it clear. She didn't lose everything. What she lost was one show. Now, granted, it was a massive flagship show. Her name was on it. It was the hub. But it was still just one piece. The multifaceted system she'd built, diversified revenue streams, delegated operations, shifting from just being the brand to owning the infrastructure that supported the brand, that system was largely still running. Her production company kept going, developing other shows. Her real estate ventures, separate operations, kept generating income. Her digital content library, already out there, kept earning. And that is the fundamental difference, really profound, between being just, working famous, where your income is tied to your daily gig and public mood, and being someone who has strategically built sustainable wealth, independent of any single project.
That's such a powerful distinction for everyone listening to think about, especially today. So ask yourself, are you just building a personal brand that needs you, your presence, your constant effort, and relies totally on public approval? Or are you actively structuring something more, a platform, a system that can adapt, evolve, maybe even outlive you? Something that can withstand the challenges that inevitably come. All right, let's talk about kindness. If there's one word that defined Ellen's public image for, almost 2 decades, that's it. It wasn't just a marketing tagline, was it? Our sources suggest it was deeper, like a mantra. She literally closed every single show with, "Be kind to one another." They describe it almost like a daily discipline, repeated so consistently it just became cultural currency. Everyone knew it was her thing, part of her identity.
Exactly. And what's illuminating is how that commitment wasn't just words. It was baked into the show's DNA, into the production choices, the stories they told. Think about all those surprise donations to people struggling, the full college scholarships she gave away, those incredibly emotional family reunions she set up. These weren't random acts. Sources say they were deliberate choices strategically designed to link her brand, her name, with empathy and action. Most hosts just interview people. Ellen consistently uplifted them, turned segments into these little narratives of generosity. Her kindness content wasn't just nice, it was inherently shareable, viral, and it built something rare, real emotional equity with her audience. People tuned in to feel good, feel safe, be reminded of positive things. It created this powerful feedback loop, too. The audience felt part of the kindness.
Which brings us to the paradox, the thing that caused so much confusion and backlash. If kindness was so central, so public, how did those 2020 allegations of a toxic workplace, stories of mistreatment, fear, racial insensitivity, how did they cause such a swift, almost unforgiving reaction? The gap between the public image and those alleged private realities, it was jarring for a lot of people.
And this really raises that tricky point about branding yourself on virtue. It's a double-edged sword. When kindness is your brand, the public expectation becomes absolute. There's almost no room left for error, for being humanly flawed. So that dissonance, the gap between the dancing, kind host on TV and the alleged environment behind the scenes, it felt like a deep betrayal to many viewers, like the core promise was broken. And that feeling was strong, regardless of the specifics or proof in every case. In a way, her biggest success habits building that trust, that kindness identity, they became her biggest vulnerability, because the standard she set was almost impossibly high.
But at the same time, our sources are very clear that her actual philanthropic record is huge. It's measurable, spans years, millions donated personally, and through her show Wildlife Conservation, Disaster Relief, LGBTQ+ rights, education. Her product lines gave money to animal rescue. She constantly highlighted positive causes. So how do we square that? How do we reconcile the documented public good with those really troubling private allegations?
Well, connecting this to the bigger picture, the whole controversy maybe revealed more about us, about our culture, especially online. We tend to simplify public figures, turn them into symbols, and then we get angry when they don't live up to the perfection we projected onto them. Ellen never actually claimed to be perfect, but her brand became so strongly associated with moral goodness that any deviation, even alleged ones, felt like hypocrisy to many. But despite all that heat, all the criticism, sources say she stayed consistent in one key habit: She kept showing up. She didn't hide. She faced the music, apologized publicly, took responsibility for the set's culture. And even in that final, difficult season, she still ended every show the same way. Be kind to one another. Her unique behavior wasn't about pretending to be perfect. It seemed to be about persistently trying to practice her beliefs, even when it was incredibly hard and everyone was watching her fail. That consistency, even under fire, says something.
Yeah, it really leads to a deep question for anyone listening. Are your own values strong enough to withstand public testing, intense scrutiny, when people might even be looking for flaws? Or are they just nice words that you might drop when things get tough, when holding on to them comes at a real cost? Okay, this next part feels really pivotal, maybe the most defining moment for Ellen, shaping her whole approach, April 1997. She makes this choice that didn't just change her career, it changed American TV, period. She became the first lead actor on a primetime sitcom to come out as gay, both her character and her in real life, on the cover of Time magazine, no less. Our sources really stress this wasn't a stunt. It was deeply personal, time when she had maximum visibility. Incredibly risky back then. Brave, really.
Oh, incredibly brave. And it's illuminating to see the immediate, severe cost of that decision. Yes, the puppy episode got those huge ratings, 42 million viewers, won an Emmy. Landmark television. But the fallout was fast and brutal. Advertisers bailed, costing the network millions. Conservative groups protested loudly. Ratings dropped sharply. ABC canceled the show within a year. And behind the scenes, Hollywood got cold. Casting offers just vanished. For a long time, Ellen wasn't just out of work. Sources say she was essentially blacklisted, untouchable for many. That choice to live honestly, openly, it cost her dearly, professionally, personally. It basically shattered her career for several years.
And yet, that moment, that breaking point, it seems like it became the blueprint for her life philosophy going forward. This idea of doing what's true to yourself, even if it's deeply unpopular, even if it costs you. How does she take that really painful experience, being shunned, losing her show, and turn it into a guiding principle for everything that came after? What did she learn in that fire?
Right. And it begs that question, where does real resilience come from? The kind that lasts. Ellen said something powerful once, our sources quote it. When you take risks, you learn that there will be times when you succeed and there will be times when you fail, and both are equally important. That attitude. It wasn't born from easy success. It came directly from being publicly broken, ostracized, and having to rebuild herself privately, slowly, when nobody was offering her work. She didn't try to become someone else to get back in Hollywood's good graces, didn't backtrack on who she was. She waited. She'd evolved. And when she reemerged, it wasn't diluted. It was with arguably even more self-clarity. Her decisions weren't just business strategy. They seemed fundamentally driven by her values, anchored in who she really was. Like, when she launched the talk show in 2003, she didn't make it about gossip or conflict. She centered it on joy, inclusion, resilience themes drawn directly from her own experience of being marginalized and finding her way back. That authenticity felt earned.
So did that core philosophy, alignment over approval, being true to herself, did that hold up when the 2020 scandal hit? When a completely different kind of backlash came, almost like a second wave of cancellation?
Connecting it to the bigger picture, yes, it absolutely seems like it did. She didn't try to dodge it or blame others entirely. She didn't just collapse under the pressure. She walked onto her stage, faced it directly. Our sources note she clearly said in that season premiere, "I take responsibility for what happens at my show." That felt like a direct echo of the 1997 courage. Not defensive, but taking ownership, even when it was incredibly difficult in public. Think about it. Very few people in media have faced intense backlash from both cultural conservatives back in the 90s and from more liberal audiences in 2020, and still emerged with their core message somewhat intact. Ellen didn't always win everyone over, clearly not, but she seemed to consistently choose alignment with her own truth over chasing approval. Maybe her quiet strength was understanding that your identity has to be rooted in something deeper than applause. Otherwise, you're just reacting to the noise, not making real choices based on conviction.
Yeah. So here's that deeper question for you listening to really sit with. If being fully, truly, authentically, you actually cost you your career, your income, your public image, would you still do it? And if the honest answer is no, well, then who are you actually performing for in your own life? And what's the hidden cost of that performance, that lack of alignment? All right, let's talk about influence. Our sources really position Ellen as one of the most influential media figures this century. And interestingly, not by trying to control people directly, but by mastering how people perceive things. She seemed to grasp, maybe earlier than most, that the narrative isn't just what happens, it's what people believe happened. And for 2 decades, she was incredibly skilled at shaping this public identity authentic, relatable, and crucially trustworthy. That bond with the audience was unique.
And her genius wasn't just comedy, right? It was this deep emotional literacy. She could read a room, a crowd, the cultural mood. Think about examples like her monologue after Hurricane Katrina. Taking that tragedy and turning it into this powerful call for community, that resonated deeply. Or the famous Oscar selfie in 2014. Instantly the most retweeted photo ever. Just showed she knew how to create these moments that captured the zeitgeist. She also had this knack for spotting talent online, like launching Sophia Grace and Rosie into global fame from YouTube. She wasn't just making content, she was consistently creating these cultural moments that stuck with people, showing a real mastery of shaping the public conversation.
But that kind of power thinking, mastering the narrative, it gets really tested when things go wrong, when the story starts to unravel.
Yeah.
And in 2020, with the toxic workplace stuff, the narrative around Ellen flipped almost overnight. Suddenly, she wasn't driving the conversation anymore. By many accounts, she was kind of drowning in it. All the negative press, social media. How did that influence she'd built hold up under that kind of pressure? What was her move?
Yeah, and this brings up that critical point about crisis response, especially when your brand is built on something like kindness. When that crisis hit, she had options. She could have gone silent, let lawyers handle it, issued a cold statement. She could have quietly ended the show and just vanished for a while, which many celebrities do, hope people forget. But our sources highlight her specific choice. She walked onto her own stage, season premiere, looked right into the camera, and she said pretty vulnerably, "I learned that things happened here that never should have happened. I take that very seriously, and I want to say I'm so sorry to the people who were affected." Now, was it perfect? No. Critics said it felt scripted, some fans felt it wasn't enough, some people definitely walked away. But it was a direct attempt to reclaim the narrative, not by denying, but by acknowledging harm and accepting the cost. That move itself, owning the stage, facing the issue head-on instead of running, that was, in its way, a masterclass in trying to exert influence even under fire, choosing transparency over just defense.
And she didn't just stop there, right? Which is often what happens. Crisis, apology, disappear, reappear later hoping it's blown over. Our sources note that after the show ended, she went back to stand-up. Her roots. Released that Netflix special for your approval. And she used that platform to talk about it all. Turner's vulnerability, the scrutiny, into actual material, processed it publicly. How does that compare to the usual celebrity crisis playbook? What does it say about her longer-term influence?
Well, it's pretty different from the standard playbook, which is often heavy on PR spin or a total image overhaul. She explicitly didn't play the victim in her stand-up or interviews after. She didn't really lash out at critics either. She seemed to understand the platform she still had and chose transparency over just performing contrition. And what's maybe even more remarkable is she kept using her influence for causes she believed in even after the show ended. Consistently championing LGBTQ+ rights, animal protection, environmental issues, education access, raising millions for charity, funding projects. She used her voice not just for visibility, but for velocity, trying to push important issues forward. In a world where influence often feels like it's just about likes and follower counts, Ellen's power seems subtler, maybe more durable in the long run. It wasn't just popularity, it was built on years of credibility and action. And that kind of influence, rooted in values and consistent effort, is much harder to just erase overnight. Popularity is fleeting. Real influence, built over time, has deeper roots.
Right. So here's something to think about for yourself. If tomorrow, your platform, whatever that is, your job, social media, your role in your community, if it was suddenly gone or under attack, would your voice still matter? Or have you maybe been focused more on just being loud, getting attention, without building the substance, the credibility that makes people actually listen, even when the spotlight isn't on you? Okay, so let's talk about the end of the show. When the Ellen DeGeneres show finished in May 2022, after that incredible 19-season run, our sources really emphasize it wasn't this big triumphant farewell party. It felt more like a reckoning, an ending shaped by the challenges. Ellen herself said it was not the end I imagined. The final season played out under this cloud of criticism, investigations, a real shift in how audiences viewed authenticity. But instead of trying to cling on to relevance, maybe launch something new right away, which is what you often see, she did something harder, arguably more strategic long-term. She let go. Step back?
Yeah, it's really illuminating. Most public figures facing that kind of situation, they scramble for an immediate rebrand. You see new podcasts pop up overnight, daily Instagram lives trying to stay visible, big PR campaigns to fix the image. Ellen did the exact opposite. She essentially disappeared. intentionally. No desperate new ventures, no constant social media trying to stay in the conversation, no frantic damage control. She stepped away, not just retreating, it seems, but deliberately recalibrating, giving herself space. And that choice, so counterintuitive in today's always-on fame game, it really reveals her long-term thinking. It suggests she wasn't just building a life in the spotlight. She'd maybe always been building a life she could actually live when the spotlight dimmed or moved. That intentional pause allowed for a different kind of restart.
So what did she focus on during that time away, that intentional absence from the daily grind, the public eye? What did that recalibration actually look like?
Well, it raises that important question about what genuine reinvention looks like after a public fall, right? Our sources show that in the years after leaving daytime TV, Ellen really leaned into projects deeply aligned with her personal core values. Things that maybe got less focus during the show's peak. She poured energy into her Ellen DeGeneres Wildlife Fund, focusing on conservation, especially protecting mountain gorillas in Rwanda, something she'd long cared about. She doubled down publicly on things like sustainability, animal rights, plant-based living principles she'd practiced privately, now brought forward more intentionally. And she leaned into the personal, too. Relocated to England with Portia for a quieter, slower life. Pictures showed her gardening, being in nature, away from the Hollywood scene. No big entourage. It wasn't a comeback strategy. It felt like a conscious choice to slow down, reorder priorities, get back to what mattered to her beyond fame.
And then, 2024, after that period of quiet recalibration, she comes back. Not to daytime TV, not a new talk show, but back to stand-up comedy, where it all started for her. With that Netflix special For Your Approval, how significant was that return, that full circle moment? What did it signal?
Connecting it to the bigger picture, it felt incredibly significant. A powerful full circle moment, just her, a mic, a stage, no filter. And crucially, the material wasn't sanitized. She talked directly about the scandal, the silence, the pain of feeling judged by a world that once adored her. She addressed the show ending, the allegations, feeling canceled. The brilliance of the strategy, looking back, was that by stepping away when the noise was loudest, she protected what mattered most. Her core audience, maybe, her own peace, her integrity. She didn't desperately fight for forgiveness when the wounds were fresh. She waited until she was ready to talk about it on her terms, through her art form. And this really highlights a key difference. True reinvention isn't reactive, it's chosen. Her journey suggests you don't rebuild by trying to erase the past. You rebuild by integrating it, becoming someone wiser, maybe quieter, but still honest. She played the long game. And in doing that, she didn't just reclaim a career path, she seemed to reclaim a life aligned with her values, proving redemption is more about internal alignment than external approval.
So the final question for you listening is this. Are you playing just for today? Just to be seen right now, chasing that immediate validation, the quick applause? Or are you building something more substantial, something you can actually stand on, that gives you a foundation, a quiet integrity, even when the applause stops, which it eventually does, and the ground shifts under you? Hashtag outro. Wow, what an incredible deep dive today, Ellen DeGeneres' story. It's really not just about fame or money or even about forgiveness, is it? Our sources really paint a picture of this profound kind of endurance, the kind that doesn't just come from being popular, but from having these deep-seated principles, this commitment to being authentic. She built this massive $500 million empire by being, for a long time, relentlessly herself, embodying that kindness message. When that very self came under intense fire, when the world seemed to turn, she didn't just change her stripes to please everyone and run away. She recalibrated deeply, personally to face it, internally and publicly, showing strength and self-ownership.
Yeah, what's truly fascinating here, I think, isn't just that she survived being canceled, whatever that term really means. It's that she seemed to emerge from it without becoming totally bitter or defensive or just vanishing completely. She took responsibility. She chose transparency, even when it must have been incredibly painful. She showed commitment to her values through action. And maybe most importantly, she kind of proved that a brand or an identity built on core values doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be human, capable of messing up, capable of growth, capable of accountability. And this really makes you think about redemption, doesn't it? It's not just getting back to where you were. It's about showing who you've become through that whole challenging process. Ellen's ultimate success maybe wasn't just staying on top. It was learning how to stand tall with integrity, even when everything shifted under her feet and the world was watching her stumble. That's what makes her story so compelling, I think. Not just the laughs, but the courage to keep speaking her truth, embodying her message, even when it got quiet, even when it got hard.
So whether you're leading a team, building your own brand, or just figuring out who you are and what you stand for, remember this. Your real legacy probably won't be defined just by how high you climb, but maybe more by how honestly and authentically you navigate the setbacks, the challenges that life throws at everyone. Because,
At the end of the day, popularity fades. Success can be temporary. But character builds over time. It compounds. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most valuable thing to protect on your own journey. Have you ever felt misunderstood when you're trying to do the right thing? Ever felt like the world just judged you on one bad moment, forgetting everything else? Ellen's story is unique, of course, but that feeling, being reduced to a headline, a rumor, one mistake, that's something a lot of us can probably relate to on some level. If you ever had to quietly, maybe painfully, rebuild yourself without an audience cheering you on, maybe reflect on the strength it took. And if this deep dive resonated with you, made you pause, think, see someone, or even yourself a bit differently, then stay curious. Keep exploring with us. Because behind every public story, there's usually a very private struggle. And behind every big fortune, there's often a deep philosophy.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
And remember to be kind. Not just to one another, but maybe just as importantly, be kind to yourself.